Hello, everybody. Looks like we have quorum, so I will call this meeting of the Public Works Commission to order. The first item on our, I guess I should actually call roll. So we'll start with calling the roll. Commissioner Colette, if you're here, please indicate by saying here.
Here.
Commissioner Hilton.
I am here as well.
Commissioner Crowley.
Here.
Commissioner Ellis.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
All right, now that we officially have quorum, the first item on our agenda is an approval of the minutes from our meeting on October 6th, and I would entertain a motion on the minutes.
Mr. Chair, I would move to accept the minutes as published.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the minutes are approved.
Chair Gravett, this is Kathy. For the record, could you just let me know who was the second on that?
Oh, that was
Commissioner Collette.
Commissioner Collette. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the next item of business is the election and appointment of Public Works Commission officials. Two positions are up for election, chair and vice chair. At this time, I would accept a nomination for chair.
Chair Gravatt, I nominate Crispin Gravatt for the chair.
Thank you. We have a nomination. Do we need a second on that nomination? Oh, and then we just, thank you for the nomination. I do accept the nomination. All those in favor of this nomination, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same sign? And with that, the election of the chair position goes to me once more, Chair Gravatt. Thank you. Up next is the nomination for the vice chair position, and I would entertain a nomination.
Chair Gravatt,
Yes,
I move that we nominate Jane Ellis for the vice chair position.
we have a nomination of Commissioner Ellis for the vice chair position. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Chair Gravatt, this is Kathy. I'm going to interrupt for just a second. According to the script, we do need to have a second for these motions.
Thank you. We have a nomination. Do we have a second for the nomination of Commissioner Ellis for the vice chair position?
Mr. Chair, I would second that motion.
Thank you. We have a nomination and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair Gravatt, we should
Yes.
also make sure that Commissioner Ellis is willing to accept the nomination. Thank you.
Thank goodness this only happens one time a year. Commissioner Ellis, do you accept the nomination?
I do, thank you.
All right, thank you. All those in favor of this nomination, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same sign? And with that, the nomination carries.
And Mary, just a quick point of order. Do we need to make sure that we have a second for the chair nomination?
We certainly can go back and correct the record. I think given that Chair Gravatt accepted the nomination, that can act as a second in a sense.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you for following up on that. All right, with those election of the Public Works Commission officials out of the way, we move on to our next item of business, a presentation on facility management consolidation. And with that, I will turn it over to staff.
There we go. Thank you. Today I'll be giving an overview on our facility management, some changes that are pending there. I will be covering part of the presentation. With me is Yorick Tatascini, who manages our facilities and operations team, and so he'll be covering the back half of the presentation. And the presentation, this is for information only. No motion is requested. I wanted to provide a little bit of the background. Facility management in the city of Boise traditionally has been pretty decentralized. We've had different groups essentially having their own folks managing their buildings. Example, our library folks have their own maintenance staff, park staff have their own, et cetera. And are we getting some sort of an echo back here? Oh. Are we good? Not quite. At first, I thought I was just imagining it. Our facilities have been decentralized. About the closest that we had, say, 20 years back to a centralized function was what we used to call government buildings, who took care of really city hall and maybe a few other odds and ends building type things. And it kind of bounced around in different departments, landed in public works I think it was about 2001. Since then, I think public works has kind of brought a little more our traditional like systematic approach to facility management. About 10 years ago, we took the first step toward consolidating, and that was to bring in our fire station, the building maintenance aspect of it into, again, what was then called government buildings. And really kind of started that path down that road. And in the more recent times, we formed my division, the facility program group, about 4 years back. I've spoke to that at least for many of you a few times before. But the idea was to really bring facilities as a program, or cradle to grave, where part of our team plans, designs, oversees construction. Part of the team headed by Yorick is our facility services and operations group. And we kind of rebranded from government buildings label to really better accurately describe what we do. The services part of facility services and operations, or FSO, we often abbreviate it. Services part is things like room setup. The chairs get here and we need different configurations. That all that kind of funnels through a work order system that the FSO team does. Things like moves, those kind of day-to-day services that kind of keep us running. The operations part is everything from planning future remodel needs, evaluations. Like I've talked to the commission several times about kind of our long-term strategy for our facilities, as well as kind of the more day-to-day things of ensuring that our building temperature controls and system is working right, planning repairs of our everything from like our building chillers to replacing lights, et cetera. It's really kind of a whole gamut. Again, some are much more kind of planned out in the future, and others are much more like short-term kind of more reactive things. And so that's kind of how we've been operating. And again, we've kind of brought the new buildings together with the operating piece to try to have a much tighter connection, so that as we build things, we really understand the issues that are involved in long-term maintenance, so that we can really kind of think more longer term. About a year and a half ago, we initiated a study really it was led through the mayor's office. And it was part of what we call a priority-based budgeting effort, or PBB as we love to call it. We like acronyms. And what priority-based budgeting is kind of a twofold effort. One is to really to look at where the city's spending our resources and making sure that we're really aligned with spending resources in our right priority areas. The other part of PBB looks at, are there functions that we perform? Are there ways to do things more efficiently? And that's really kind of what really started this latest effort. And that was really to look at how we manage our facilities. Is there a better way to do it? I call it a consolidation study. We didn't start off saying, how are we going to consolidate? But that's really kind of more of an outcome of that. Again, working with the mayor's office and with other departments, they brought in an outside building consultant to really evaluate how each of these independent facility management groups operated, looked at our financial data, our staffing models, et cetera. And really what all shook out of that was a plan that we should consolidate the library and our parks facilities into one team. A little bit of a caveat with parks facilities, we're talking about the buildings, and even though there's really more definition to be had in terms of, I keep using the example of like Ice World. We think it makes sense for us to take care of the building heating cooling system. Probably best to leave parks to drive the Zambonis. And exactly where that line, exactly what scope really makes the most sense to move into the building management area is yet to be determined. And Yorick will talk a little bit about future steps there. Really what led to that recommendation is that really revolved around efficiency, best use of our resources. Felt like it's going to lead to better outcomes, better managed facilities, as well as benefits for our staff in terms of like having a bigger team really provides opportunities for kind of career path and growth within our staffing organization. And the consolidation, the recommendation came to consolidate under FSO as opposed to consolidate under library is just became, if I can toot Yorick's horn for a minute, really became very clear that his processes, his organization, he just had more resources, was really like much more sophisticated, much more where we want to go as a facility maintenance. So that's kind of what led to that decision. We, in terms of facilities, there are certain facilities that we decided to put to the side. For example, we evaluated should our housing community development has some maintenance teams that provide support for some of our rental housing. At the time, we've kind of put that to the side, and it's a little different operation than the rest of the facility maintenance, and that's kind of like to be decided in the future, as well as some of our enterprise fund, like the water renewal, the buildings out at the water renewal facility or the airport. Those are much more specialized operations, and so again, felt like at this point anyway, it makes sense to kind of leave those operating on their own. And you know, in a sense, what really kind of boiled down is, in my mind, was it makes sense to consolidate, I'll say to utilize people's expertise. Yorick's team is in the business of managing buildings, and let him focus on that, and let library folks focus on what they know best. That's kind of what led to this point. And so I'm going to hand it off to Yorick, who will talk a little bit more about the plans, how they've evolved where we're at and kind of where we're headed next. So. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Rob, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so now that we have some direction to go ahead and move forward with the consolidation of facility services, we're going to go into a planning phase this year. And what we'll do really is, well, first and foremost, we'll set expectations, right? So we're drafting a service agreement that we'll share with the various departments that we're consolidating with, and you know, kind of outline what it is that we do, what they can expect from us, what services and at which level we'll provide these services. And you know, this is largely in part because these departments have maintenance folks of their own, and they're used to a certain type of service, and that's bound to change somewhat. And so we want to lay that out and set that out there. And then also what we'll look at is things like their workflow processes. So what would be some challenges as well as opportunities? So an example of a challenge might be the libraries are open to the public 7 days a week. Our team operates Monday through Friday. Their team currently has people staffed on Saturdays. And so how do we accommodate that? Because the goal is really not to just keep separate teams for separate departments. It's really to bring them into our team, and then how we function is we rotate through facilities. So we get cross training and avoid the burnout and things like that. So that's what we're talking about. So we'll look at things like service agreements. So for example, janitorial, snow removal, those types of things. You know, currently there's each department has separate contracts. How can we bring all these into one? And maybe there's economies of scale. Maybe it's just economies of staff time, I think primarily is what we'll be looking at there. And then costs, you know, what's being spent and how. So evaluate those things, and also assess current staffing levels. So develop an organizational chart to where, or I guess evolve ours so we know how we can better serve these other departments. How are we going to manage the folks out in the field, so on and so forth. So we'll assess the different maintenance staffing levels of each different groups, and then see if there are any gaps out there that we can fill. And we're thinking, based on the FEA study, that we can fill some of those gaps by insourcing some positions. So again, looking across all the departments, how we, you know, are some using different electrical services. You know, maybe we can't justify a full-time electrician, but if you combine these other facilities, bring them into the mix, then it makes sense to hire another one. And with the current market, it's clearly a benefit to insource, because trying to find an electrician these days is pretty challenging. So, and then so we'll take all that information and then develop the strategy for moving forward. And also, so what we call a CMMS, so a computerized maintenance management system, which is a way to track all the assets that we maintain. So facility assets, think buildings and building systems like HVAC, electrical, so on and so forth. And so the recommendation for FEA was for all these different departments to implement the CMMS, the solution that the city identified 7-8 years ago. And so we'd like to start implementing that starting this year, and in large part just to know basically an accounting of all the buildings and assets that are out there. So understand what we'll be taking over, and then also, you know, start tracking data. So we're, you know, the work orders against those assets, you know, where are we putting our time? What is it costing us? Where's our efforts and time going? So we'll be doing that. And then as we look ahead to FY23 and 24, so a lot of that still has to be determined, right, based on what we find out this year. But we know that we'll continue with things like the CMMS implementation and data tracking to help inform how we move forward with assimilating these other departments, maintenance teams, and into our team. And we'll probably do things like start consolidating services, like the contracted services, janitorial, and so on when contracts come due, consolidating those. And then, the assimilation of the maintenance staff into our team, getting that process going, and the ongoing review of performance data, as well as financial data. So recently, really recently, as we were going through this process, it turns out that there was a person that was responsible for one of the maintenance team that left the organization, and that created an opportunity to sort of accelerate the process with the library. So now we decided as an opportunity to bring that team in and a bit quicker since the person they reported to is no longer there. And so what we started doing before we bring them in, we want to implement the maintenance management system, get them playing in the system so we can start understanding, again, those things that I talked about, where they spend their time, their money, how they function. So we've gone ahead and done some staff training and got them going in ViewWorks. We wanted to align that with the fiscal year. So ideally, if we have a full fiscal year's worth of data as we move forward, it's a more complete data set. So we were able to achieve that. And now the workflow, the assigning of work orders and closing of work orders and tracking cost data is going through our team like it would for any other facility. So work request comes into our office, we review it, we assign it, and work with the library staff that way. So, and that's we've been doing that about a month now, and that seems to be going pretty well. And then so we're hoping that the information we get from that is going to help inform those other things, like how we're going to bring them in and make sure we provide the same level of service, or how are we going to meet those expectations. An example is library staff is also, some of their staff, they cover courier routes and things like that. So when we bring them into our team, that will go away. So the library also needs to understand this so they can make their arrangements that they need to fill those gaps when they do occur. And also we're trying to establish a benchmark. So as we move forward, we can evaluate what we do moving forward to that benchmark year, which we hope to be FY22. And then we'll also be starting to track their assets and gathering that information later this month, where we'll go to each location and collect asset data and to populate the CMMS. So next steps really is a lot of the things that I was discussed in the previous slide, right? So a lot of the planning effort will be taking place. And the focus will be on expediting the library consolidation and bringing that team in. We're not sure exactly on timeline for that. And then we'll be looking to take what we learned from that process and start planning for parks and getting them brought in. The timeline for bringing that department in hasn't been determined yet. But as that comes into focus, I think we'll be in a better place to handle that. And we'll also want to know how things are working, as we go along the way. What's working well? Are we meeting the objectives of the PBB? And are there any adjustments that we need to make as we go and move forward? And with that, I will turn it back.
Chair and members of the commission, one of the other things I forgot to mention before, one of the other benefits I think of the consolidation that we've talked about is really better able to align ourselves with some of the climate goals that we have moving forward. Right now, we coordinate with the various facility managers, But I think really having that under a little tighter control and a little tighter like focus on it, where especially where we're closely aligned with Steve Hubble and his team. I think that's going to be another like really help us make sure that all these different facility activities really align under that. So anyway, I was thinking I forgot to mention that. And with that, I think we'll stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Really appreciate that last note. That was a good bit of information. Are there any questions from the commission?
Yes, Chair Gravatt, I actually have it's sort of a several tiered question. The first thing that I'm interested in knowing is what is because you talked about staff members, but also contractors, sort of what's the proportion of direct staff who are affected versus contract work that's, I think it makes sense to consolidate contract work, but when we start to talk about staff who are being affected, what does that look like? Like actual facility staff who are on the ground doing the work.
So is the question really, our staff, are we giving consideration to laying off staff? Is that
right? Because I think it's sort of where I'm going is as soon as I hear efficiencies and it makes sense, but then it's, when I worked at Boise State and we had someone new come in and she was going to revamp facilities and she did a great job, and they saved money and they definitely were much more effective. But the sort of byproduct of that is that the folks who were actually dealing with all the facilities work had additional burden placed on them. And so I just wonder what that looks like to them. And has there been any sort of conversations happening with the people who are actually on the ground doing the work? And what does this new consolidation mean for them? Does it mean that they're having to move from facility to facility? Or will you still have set staff in one place? What does that look like for the people who actually, for the quality of life for the people who have to do the work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, on the staffing question, I think we're looking to actually bring more staff in. So when we look at the groups and the teams we're going to bring in, what we're looking at is, okay, what is their expertise? And then also what is their current role in the organization? So the idea is to as we look at the org chart, is not to demote anybody. In fact, quite the opposite. If we think, as Rob mentioned, this will create more opportunities for folks to move about because there's just simply more positions that will need to be filled. There is a change management element to all of this as well, and that's underway. And yes, the folks involved have been involved or part of the discussion. And have had the opportunity to have input as well. As far as their day-to-day life changing, I think that yes, it will. Like I mentioned earlier, we will be assimilating into our team and our work process, but we also think that's a bit of a benefit because it will prevent burnout by shifting folks around. We also think things like on-call. Currently, you have 3 individuals, for example, at the library that are on call, and they rotate, I think, 1 month on, 1 month at a time through the 3 of them. And so now we're looking at, rotating through more folks for a less amount of time each time. So I think there'll be a lot of benefits for them, and I think they understand that as well.
Thank you.
Chair and Commission, just maybe one more thing just to kind of add on to that. The efficiencies that we're talking about, we're not talking about coming in and I think to your point is Xing out half the people and we can, but frankly, a lot of it is really leveraging folks so that we can do a much better job with the folks that we have. And again, that's part of where that computer maintenance management system comes in, is we can make sure that we're not forgetting to change the filters in that, et cetera. And so I think a lot of it is better outcomes. And we've talked a lot about our gains, not necessarily in immediate operational savings, but more about avoiding how quickly we're going to have to add folks and avoiding more expensive repairs as we move forward.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission?
Chair Gravad, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Well, and a comment too. I did write down climate action, so it did occur to me. Thank you for mentioning that, because I'm thinking total cost of ownership is going to definitely come into play as you're working on your climate action goals. So it was very nice to hear that. I almost wanted to ask, I'll ask this first. How are you able to say how many buildings there are that the city of Boise has and manages? They own these buildings, they manage these buildings. And I'm already like trying to make an org chart in my mind of like, because we're only talking about libraries at this point, but I saw the part about the fire station. So I'm thinking on all those groups, are you able to share with us those details? Is that helpful for us to see? Where are we on consolidating? Because I'm kind of wanting to see that picture.
Chair and Commissioner, we can pull together quickly a summary. To be honest, part of it is like, what do you consider a building? Like the parks, restrooms, or we really kind of consider occupied structures is our focus. Off the top of my head, I believe that there are somewhere in the range of 100. Rob? I'm not, to be honest, like I'm not really sure, because again, it's like if we haven't really focused a whole lot on like airport facilities, et cetera, but we'd be happy to pull together a summary of kind of like all the city facilities. Here's what are currently in our portfolio today. Here's what we anticipate as we take this next step with library and parks. So be happy to provide that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the commission? All right, well, hearing none, I will thank you for your presentation. And that is the last item on our regular agenda. Is there anything else to come before the commission today?
Chair Gravad.
Yes, Councilmember Beijing.
I just want to make a quick comment. As everybody here knows, the voters returned an overwhelming yes on the ballot issue last night. And I think they did that because they received a lot of good information, detailed information, engineering information about what the bond would mean, both financially and in terms of the long-term sort of productive future of our city. And the voters received that information because this commission and the Public Works Department did a massive amount of work in the last 4 years. The plan reflects, I think, what the public wants through that public outreach work that flowed up. And the yes shows, so easy to ignore, but the yes shows that the community is so behind the work that this commission is doing. So thank you to the commission, to the Public Works Department, to the current chair, to the previous chair who may have his camera off. It makes my job easier when you guys do things that everybody loves and you do that hard work, and it's going to make our city so much better. So I just wanted to congratulate and thank everybody here for that.
Commissioner, I'd like to second that as well. Every time I got any kind of information in the mail, I tried to look at it as the lens of someone who didn't know anything about it. And it was informative. It was easy to understand. I think that the Public Works Department did an excellent job of conveying that information.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, staff, for all your hard work.
And I'll say one more. Chair
Oh, sure.
Gravad.
Go ahead.
I was just really proud. I was really excited, and I was glad there were a lot of smart people voting. It was great to see the 80%. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you all. If there is nothing else to come before the commission, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I would move to adjourn.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Chair Gravad, I've motioned that we adjourn.
All right, and we have a second from Commissioner Ellis. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, the same sign? Hearing none, the motion carries and we are adjourned. Thank you all.